everyone, Comic Reviewer here, and this time reviewing on Planet 51. Now, as you know, Planet 51 is a 2009 comedy animated science fiction movie, and the movie was also made by Handmade Films. That was more like a kind of lesser known company that hasn't done any movies since 2010, as well as being made by a Spanish animation studio, Lilian Animation Studios. And the premise is meant to have this, where on an alien world, it's meant to represent the days of the 1950s, where comic books were starting out, people were afraid of what they didn't understood, and you basically had these kind of conspiracies and people panicking over certain things. And the premise of the movie is meant to be about Lem, voiced by Justin Long, who is basically this alien teenage boy living on his basically home world, which is meant to be a representative of the 1950s, which we kind of see. For example, like, when it rains, meteors happen, we kind of have the old styles of the 50s, and at the same time is also meant to have his friends, who is Skiff, who is basically his best friend, who works at the comic book store and is kind of this nutcase, and you also got his love interest's little brother, who is basically just there to be the kind of brother-like character, and at the same time wants to win the heart of his love interest, Lyra, voiced by Jessica Biel. Now, I do admit Lena's character is thrown in there to kind of be the obstacle to Lem, as he wants to try and show how much he cares about her, and you basically got this alien hippie who's employed to be aware of him, whose name is Glare. And Glare is meant to be a representative of how the 60s are slowly coming, and kind of meant to be basically the start of a new era. So pretty much after a astronaut who lands on the planet, known as Chuck Baker, voiced by Dwayne The Rock, he's basically meant to be this goofball, this kind of, like, implied to be an outcast himself on his planet Earth. And you can tell that Chuck kind of tries to, get back to his home, back to his spaceship, so that way he doesn't get marooned. And at the same time, you've also got his robotic vehicle thing called Rover that is kind of like a dog. And now, pretty much the film is meant to joke about how people were gullible back then, how people were easy to kind of fool and manipulate. Because keep in mind, if you remember when Orson Welles did War of the Worlds, a lot of people thought aliens were attacking. And this was a time when people didn't understood what was beyond there. Now, I do admit with some of the characters, most notably the people who run the army base, Planet 51, some of them just feel villains for the sake of it. For example, Gary Oldman's character, General Crow, isn't really a villain, he just properly doesn't understand basically what's out there. And they could have properly redeemed him, but they don't properly do it. And when you've got Professor Kipple, pretty much voiced by John Gleese, he's kind of just the kind of main scientist, and kind of just takes people's brains and kind of employed to, not really understood things. And I know 24 Frames of Frank reviewed this. I feel he only reviewed this because he thinks it was what people wanted to hear, but I think you do see what's in their version of Planet 51. For example, you see old satellites, you basically see how they take the brains out of two officers who they believe to be mind-controlled. And at the same time, I do feel the story is there. It's meant to kind of show what could happen if we as humans landed on a planet that was based on the 1950s. So, I think somewhere the movie is alright. It has a premise, it has a plot, and it definitely wants to be the next DreamWorks movie. Which is kind of ironic, as the film was directed by the same guy who wrote Shrek and Shrek 2. So I think Planet 51 crash landed, left its movie, and gives you this kind of hilarious, more kind of what is movie. So I think it deserves a thumbs up. Still good and still alright. So, Comic Reviewer here, signing out.